Well, hello.
Hi.
We're here to talk living books again. So last time, Tabitha and I introduced ourselves and we discussed what are living books. We also kind of discussed what we're trying to do with the Living Books Consortium Facebook group page, whichever it is. Uh, but just by way of further introduction, we thought this week we'd let you know a little bit more about ourselves. So Tabitha, I met you through my husband, then friend, now husband, because you guys were a part of, your families were part of the same church there in
Yes.
Kansas.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, I
This
think it
was
would bring
I'm trying to
college
remember
friends.
how many years ago this was. What was this? 13, 14 years ago?
Yeah, we're coming up on our 12th anniversary, and that was after college. So,
Yes.
yeah, probably around 14 or so years ago.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so mostly we've had a long distance friendship.
Yeah.
Um, but it's been good and encouraging. Um, so then we've been homeschooling now for 5 years officially, if you go by like when we had to start turning papers into the state. But we've been planning on it all along. So I don't
Yep.
know, you'd say we've been homeschooling for 9 years. If you count, baby and preschool years. I'm assuming same for you guys.
Oh yeah,
We're close.
we do. So my oldest is 8, and so we've we had always planned on homeschooling and just started learning and teaching from the very beginning.
All right. Good.
And it's been good.
All right. So let's
Um,
get into what we're reading lately.
I have really enjoyed. I just finished Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and just really enjoyed that.
Yay.
Yes, I knew that had been one of your favorite books,
Mhm.
and I had found um, I had found a copy that actually had 3 of her novels all in one book, and so I'm trying to go through the whole thing.
All right. So was Sense and Sensibility in there? Since you
Yes,
mentioned
it
that.
was. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the first one. Pride and Prejudice was the second, and I just started into Emma.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
All right. I just finished reading Little Britches by Ralph Moody. It's subtitled Father and I Were Ranchers. It's about this family that moves from kind of the New England area to Colorado, kind of their promise, this wonderful ranch life, and they get there and it's just pretty dilapidated and dry. And they've really got to kind of eke out a living. And so it was a really fun story of hard work. It's been compared as far as having like significance in American literature and giving a peek into childhood and history. It's been compared to Little House on the Prairie, or Little House, the series by Laura Ingalls Wilder. However,
Uh-huh.
I would say it's a lot more mature, even though it is
Hmm.
starting with a boy as 8 years old. There's some language and just some other concepts that are a lot harder than what you encounter in
Okay.
the Little House series. So I'm not really itching to read it with my kids. I've heard people would, but I personally have a 7-year-old who would read this and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna go have an adventure on my own miles from home." And so I'm just like, I don't think he needs to be involved by that right now.
Yeah.
But someday, I mean, there's really great stuff in there. Honestly, as a parent and a parent of boys, I found it really full of wisdom, especially from the dad, and just a fun read. Lots to glean from it.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then I have another stack of books, but they're not fiction, but they're pretty great. So
Oh
anyway,
wow.
yeah, a little bit of Charlotte Mason and classical
Yes.
education thought and good practical theology and a book called Finish because I need help with that. Because things like tornadoes and technical difficulties get in the way, right? At least
Yeah.
today. All right. So our topic for today is kind of living books and how they connect to real life experiences. The kind of thing that you might see more traditionally written out in a curriculum, put on a schedule. And our experience has been that if you're reading good books and leave space in your child's day, especially with you enjoying life with them, a lot of these beautiful things just happen.
Yep.
Yeah. Because I'm not a Pinterest mom. If it depended on getting on Pinterest and trying to do all the things and make them pretty, just no.
Yeah. I like Pinterest for saving idea things, but I don't use it for lots of homeschool ideas and activity ideas. Oh no.
Yeah. If you are a Pinterest mom, more power to you. It just makes me crazy. All right. So we wanted to first start out with giving some examples of what this looks like for our families. So Tabitha, what's one of your favorite examples of how you've seen a living book kind of come to life?
Well, we'll just be reading books together as, we'll get together on the couch, we'll read a book, and pretty soon, within the next few days, I will see the kids doing things that they read about in the book and trying things for the first time. Like, okay, for instance, one day we read about, I think it was a hippopotamus who loved to roller skate. My kids have never roller skated before. And I didn't even realize this, but they went over to grandma's house later and they found some dusty, filthy old skates in her garage. And they started learning to roller skate. because they were like, hey, this sounds like fun.
They probably saw what other people might have thought was junk, and they're like, oh, I know what that is. I'm going to try
it. Yes.
Which could be dangerous, which is why we have to think about what books we put into our kids.
Very much, yes. And because Marcus, I'll see him try all kinds of things. One day we read, it was just a children's picture book, a storybook, and we read about a little animal who she made it play restaurants, okay, and then served her family members, Brianna went all to grandma's house. They made a sign. She hoodwinked grandma into actually doing a full-blown dinner with menu, and Brianna was the waitress. And we invited some other family members, and they did, and we had a whole big meal with menu and a waitress and everything, and this was all Brianna's doing because of the story we'd read.
That's great. So really what you're saying is that when you guys read books, all you have to do is send them to grandma's house and the magic happens. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes. We live right next door to grandma. So, but yes.
Yeah. Well, we have some traditions that are kind of built around books, and they were not stuff that we read in some guidebook on this is what you have to do with this book. But they're things that we have just enjoyed together. So one of our favorite picture books has been Blueberries for Sal by Robert McCarthy. So probably starting when my kids were like 4 and 2, and the little ones really can't follow it that well. But the 4-year-old, yeah. And so as long as we've been reading that, we have almost every year gotten that book out in late May or June and then gone and picked blueberries together. And so it's a beautiful book. And one of the most memorable little things from it is kerplink, kerplink, kerplunk. Or, yeah, I can't remember if there's an art here, but it's so cute. And so when you go blueberry picking, you just have to say it. And,
yes.
and you know, if your little one grabs some blueberries out of the bucket to nibble, did you grab a tremendous mouthful instead? So all these little lines that if you read these books together with your kids, that just kind of become a part of your family culture. So yeah, that one's been a lot of fun for us. And then just the original Winnie the Pooh stories by A.A. Milne. Delightful. And then we have a rather long driveway. You've got to go across a creek over a little concrete bridge. And so, and so when the creek is running, my kids have always begged to play Pooh sticks. So we'll gather whatever little twigs we find, drop them on one side, and scurry over to the other side to watch how fast they come out.
Yes.
So those are just some of the earlier stories that you can enjoy with younger children and those experiences. If you don't have a creek right by you, probably there's a park somewhere in your area where you can go and find a bridge to play Pooh sticks. Things like that, where maybe just like for us, going berry picking is much more intentional. You have to drive there, but it's still an overflow of the books that we're reading. And so that's fun. And especially when these are books that you're enjoying together on a fairly regular basis anyway. It's not like, oh my goodness, we're reading this book this week. We've got to get this on the schedule that week too. And oh, if the weather's not just right, then we've ruined something. It's like, no. If you've made this book kind of a part of your family culture because you enjoy it together, then you'll be able to pull that kind of from your treasury, if you will, whenever you go to pick berries or things like that. So those are two fun examples. Did you have any others that you thought of?
Well, there were a couple things where we would go afterwards and intentionally do something. For instance, after we read Little House on the Prairie, the one about her time in Kansas, Laura's time in Kansas. They actually had prairie days at her original homestead, and so the kids got to go out there, and they even got to meet some of the Wilder descendants.
Oh wow!
And they got to do all kinds of hands-on things that the pioneers would have done. You know, they made little dolls and just all kinds of fun little things. And so that kind of helped connect the story to real life for them.
Yeah.
So that they got to see, okay, there was a real Laura, and this is the way she really lived.
Yeah,
you know?
That's great.
And so that's fun. And then just this afternoon, actually, we were reading a picture book about Irving Berlin, the immigrant boy who made America sing. And so afterwards, we this isn't as much really a hands-on activity, but we went to YouTube and looked and watched a short video of Irving Berlin himself singing the song that he wrote, God Bless America. And my kids were like, oh, we know that song.
Oh, that's great.
So.
Yeah. Well, to go back to that concept of you actually got to go see where and how kind of Laura Ingalls Wilder would have lived growing up. And I think it's such a fantastic idea to search out some of the local history and local stories and find good books there. We actually live very close to the historical Trail of Tears. And so there are a lot of historical markers
Yeah.
Places that are named for Cherokees and things like that. So we've had that kind of visual of this is where this kind of stuff took place. And so if we wanted to read a book about that, which we have, they've got a real world connection point with that. And we also, we've read about Sequoia. And I mean, there's schools nearby that are named for Sequoia, who created the Cherokee alphabet and things like that. And so a great way to start with history reading is to really kind of figure out what important parts of history have happened right around you, learning your local history and geography. And I think that like connecting geography with history just brings so much more real interest and
Oh, yes.
and connection with it.
Mhm.
Where if you just went with, well, they're supposed to learn this history and this stuff and this stuff and this stuff, especially for young kids.
Mhm.
It's just so much better if you are going through and learning the proper things. At least try to find also some local points of history so that they make that connection there, and then realize that even these other things that may
Yeah.
have happened in other places, well, they're real places too, and the kids that are there might have that same kind of feeling about those events that happen close to them. So just an aside, I kind of love history.
I started laughing when you, me too, but I started laughing a little bit when you first started talking about it because where I grew up in Cherryville, Kansas, the only museum that we had and what we were known for, the only real history that the town was known for was the Benders. And they were the Benders. They were a family that basically murdered people. So
Oh no,
that's our history.
I do remember lots of outlaws hiding out in Southeast Kansas. So.
Yeah, they ran like a hotel and people would come through and stay and they would murder them and steal their money. I mean, it was like horror.
Yeah.
So,
All right. So I had another example. Those first examples that we've given, a lot of them are more focused on very really stuff you can even start with preschoolers in the books that you read and just going out and enjoying them together. Another one that we read around age 7 is Paddle to the Sea. And that one is, of course, connecting a fun story about this little wooden boat with a little Indian man on it, traveling through the Great Lakes and all the way out into the ocean. And it's a great way of learning. Here it is, if anybody's seen it by wants to see it, Clancy Halling. It's a great way to learn your Great Lakes geography. Sorry, we have flies because we had windows replaced. We've had lots of doors and windows open lately, and the flies are out. But in addition to that, just like playing poo sticks, you can drop something in the water. So, I mean, if there's water running, kids are going to want to put something in it and to watch it move. That's just a part of childhood. And this book captures that. And so there again is another connection point between something in this book and something kids can actually just go out and experience. And again, if you're not close to water, you may have to go find some. For us, they just go outside when it's wet and make that stuff happen. Now for a little bit older kids, my oldest is 9, and so we've gotten into some harder books and things, but my oldest read The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Hyle. Here's a copy of it if anybody wanted to see it. It has, really fun kind of etchings, illustrations. And it's got a lot of Old English in it. And so it's one of those books where it's like, gosh, I don't know how much of this he's really going to understand. But kids just seem to have this way of just reading and ignoring the words they don't understand and more or less kind of getting the story anyway, if they're ready for it. And so he's read it a couple of times. And I remember when he was first reading it, he was very excited about the Robin Hood story. and he told his brother stories about it. And so they would go out, and we have these really tall staffs. They call it staff forest. It's just like really tall weeds with pretty significant stalks. And so they would get a lot of those and make bows and arrows out of them, shoot them off the porch. They've done that for a couple of years now. And so that was a really fun way of seeing the stories come alive in their playtime. So yeah. And how what your oldest is reading spills over even into the younger child's imaginative play. So that was really fun to watch. Do you have any other books like that?
Yeah, we had one day when we had our history day, we went to the library, and we had gotten a bunch of books about knights and castles and medieval times. And we just had a good time reading these books and then looking through them. And then the kids dressed up, and Brianna had like a medieval type dress, and Marcus had something to dress up in. And they went and shot bows and arrows. Used bows and arrows and went target shooting.
Yay!
Yeah.
So another book that my children have particularly loved is Where the Red Fern Grows.
Yes.
And so we've seen lots of fun kind of come from that. My younger son really got attached to it in the past year. He's read it I think he's on his 3rd time through now.
Oh, wow.
So, and recently, Nathaniel gave the boys their very own small hatchets that they can only check out during like outside work time. But this 7-year-old, I think partly inspired by the fact that Billy, the main character in the book, actually chops down the biggest tree in the forest because his dogs treat a coon there. And he has to hack at it all day and into the night to chop this tree down. And so I'm just imagining this is what my 7-year-old is thinking about, he's hacking away at these, maybe they're this thick around privet trees that we get, an invasive species that we need to take out. So, but he's going at it with his hatchet that, the blade's about that big, and and wears, a blister in his hands. But I'm sure he's just like, Billy, I'm taking this thing down.
Yes. That's
so
awesome.
So many ways that stories can just kind of give the imagination something to work with, and even something to apply to make what might not be the most enjoyable work or chore more interesting.
Yep.
So, all right. So I wanted to move on to talking about ways that we can foster an environment where this sort of thing happens. We talk about this as mostly just happening in our homes with our kids. And so there might be people saying, well, that sounds lovely, but maybe that's not just automatically happening in my home. So what do we do? How do we get there from here? And I was going to say, I kind of think the knockout punch is reading and enjoying living books together. You with your kids as a family, and then as they're old enough, them enjoying them on their own, and then time outside, free time outside. And so living books, outside time, those are kind of the two key elements that I think really enable a lot of this to take place. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that that if their children don't have time to be, if we try to keep them busy so much that they don't have any time to be a little bit bored sometimes, that they won't have these opportunities to try new things and to be creative, and try new ideas. Because if we fill all of their time with good activities and leave them no time for just downtime when you have to do something to fill this time. You have to come up with something
Mhm.
and be creative. And that's what gives them the opportunity to make
Mhm.
to start making these connections and being creative and
Yeah.
try things.
Yeah. So it's not just add books, and it's not just go outside, but
Right.
actually safeguard those things so that there's time to relish the books as you're reading them and maybe not immediately pick them apart with comprehension questions or a test or something. And then the freedom to be outside without it being always structured and maybe
Hmm.
always taking field notes or always practicing a sport. There's got to
Hmm.
be some freedom for the mind to just be outside.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So very good. So that freedom needs to be there. One concept that I think is really important also, Charlotte Mason talks about the science of relations. So all of learning has to do with this science of relations. We can really only add to what we know by relating new information to information that we have already taken in. And that's why she
Hmm.
emphasizes putting the child in relationship with the vast world around them so that they can form relationships first and foremost with God, but also, of course, family, people, nature, books, ideas, all of these things. And the more that they are actually out in the real world connecting with it, more they're connecting with the people in their families, connecting with even forms of work and chores and daily habits and things like that. All of those things are going to feed the child's ability to find a place for the new information or new experiences that they encounter.
Yeah, I
So,
like
go ahead.
how I liked how she talked about this. She said, we personally have relations with all that there is in the present, all that there has been in the past, and all that there will be in the future, with all above us and all about us. And the fullness of living, expansion, expression, and serviceableness for each of us depend upon how far we apprehend these relationships and how many of them we lay hold of.
That's a great quote.
Yeah.
Love it. All right, so
Yeah.
can you give me some examples? How would you model this kind of thing for children maybe who are young or maybe who haven't practiced it?
Um, go connecting what we're reading in a book to an activity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, well, for one thing, um, as mothers, we have to have a sense of wonder and curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to be reading and learning and taking these things in and trying to find opportunities to practice and apply ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and just for children to see us have a love of books and then a love for learning in general, not just what we read but in what we do,
Mm-hmm.
um, is a good way to encourage them to do the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just thought about um, when I'm outside with my kids is a big opportunity to kind of put this on display for them. So from the time that they're young, like if we're outside, um, if we've been reading Beatrix Potter or something, then if we see a rabbit, it's, hey, that little rabbit looks like Peter, and as it jumps, saying,
Uh-huh.
the words that Beatrix Potter uses. Um, and so, I mean, even if you don't see a rabbit, but see a hole, it could be like, oh, I wonder if Mrs. Rabbit is in there cooking up something for dinner. just kind of ways to interject story and imagination into the world around you, natural world as we see it. It will do two things. It will help to increase their attentiveness because now they want to see, because this might be like some story that they've heard. And it also, I think, helps to keep alive that wonder. And like we were talking about, modeling the kind of like that you care. That interesting. Another example might be, I love the Chronicles of Narnia stories, and so we haven't read it with our kids yet, but still, if my husband and I are out in a pine wood or something with our kids, it's like, maybe we'll see a lamppost soon. I'm expecting to see a lamppost. Maybe we're in Narnia, and our kids are just like, what is that? And so we tell them. So we have read them the first book, and so now they get it. And so it's okay to like reference things without your kids knowing, not having read it yet.
What's really fun is when they start making those connections on their own, and they'll connect something to something that we read in some storybook or something, and sometimes Brianna, I've noticed her more and more trying to make analogies between things or stories that she's read and something here in the present, and sometimes it's kind of awkward and humorous, but she's making connections, in her mind it fits.
Yes.
This is this is an example of this.
And sometimes it's like after the fact, if I've told somebody, I'm like, yeah, that probably didn't make any sense in your head. But somehow I put it together, and maybe it was worth it for the exercise. So just some other ideas when you're out and about with your kids. If you sing a hymn or recite a poem that you've memorized while you're out and about, then you're connecting praise and beautiful language and descriptions with the world around you. And that is another practice related to learning books and stuff that I think is very helpful. So I think the real point here is that the things that we read or things that we memorize together are things that we take with us. So that's really kind of the big idea between how this connection happens between these living books that we read and those magical moments when they intersect with real life. You can't just control that, but if you are putting something into your treasury of stories and beautiful words and language and hymns of praise and things like that, then those are things that you can kind of pull from when you're in a different place than just sitting on the couch.
Yeah. Of relations again. The other day, or a couple nights ago, Brianna, I went upstairs to tuck her in bed, and as I came up, she shut a book that she had been reading. And after a couple of minutes of talking, she started crying. And she said, "Mom, this," and she started telling me about this story. It was a true story about a cat who lived at the library, who he lived to be 18 years old and eventually got old and died. And it was, at the end, she's towards the end, and she's crying now, and she's like, "Mom, this is so sad. This is all she can think about at the moment." And so we got to talk about the bigger picture. We got to stop and relate this to, what she was crying over is death, suffering and death. And so we got to talk about the past, related to the past, how sin is through sin, death and suffering entered the world. And then related to ourselves, we're all under the curse, and creation is under the curse. And then talk about the cross, redemption. Christ's redemption isn't just for humans. When he comes back, he's going to come back to redeem all of creation, things in heaven and things in earth.
Mm.
And the creation's groaning right now, but he's going to make all things new.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to relate it to ourselves and to the past, present, and future.
Yeah.
And just little things like that. And not every conversation is going to be deeply theological or existential in nature when we're doing these things. But it's the principle, the idea of seeing the bigger picture and connecting it to other things.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, still have life.
Still life.
Yeah. Well, related to that, that was an example of starting with a book and an experience with a book that provided a teachable moment. What I've also found is that in our family Bible time, when there's a concept or something happens in scripture or there's a command, or if honestly, what we've done a lot with our kids has been read through Proverbs. And there's a lot in Proverbs about receiving correction. It's not like, what's the theme today, kids? Probably something along the lines of the fool does not receive correction. And so there are a lot of stories that provide fantastic examples of characters who are not receiving correction or who go on in their foolishness. And so we read Wind in the Willows recently, and that is a very strong picture of willful, and self-righteous kind of determination to go your own way when your friends are just desperate to help you and to help you turn around. And so Toad, it's a very, very powerful picture of not receiving correction. And so that's one example. Aesop's fables are written kind of for this purpose.
Yeah.
And when you're reading stories like that, it's probably best to tread very lightly on the morals. Let the kids actually really sit with the story and really know and feel kind of what happens with these characters. Because oftentimes the author, if it's a good book, the author has written it in such a way to show foolishness.
Show, not tell.
Show, right, to show rather than tell. And so then those kinds of things, even if, maybe your kid read it independently, now we're in Bible time. And we're seeing that, oh, I have an example of that from this story that I read. We also have had instances where one of my boys, in his history reading, it's like just this repeated thing in history about rulers being power hungry, and the kind of things that come from that. And so if we're, like, example, in the Gospels reading about Herod, and we're talking about some of the motivations there, maybe Pontius Pilate and what motivations and things were going on during the trial of Jesus. And so they're able to connect that, oh, this kind of thing happens a lot in history, and it happens in the history that's presented in the Bible. And so they're getting not just names and dates, but understanding concepts and human nature, because they've seen those things play out in history, in stories, in literature, and then of course all over the pages of scripture.
Yes. I think that one of the things that that marks the Charlotte Mason's philosophy of education is her idea that you said the science of relations, just the idea that education and life and the world is holistic.
Yeah.
Everything connects to everything else. And so, I think a lot of times modern academia has the idea that we can take different subjects and compartmentalize them. And, you compartmentalize them and just kind of file them in their own little box with their own label. You know, over here we have science, because religion and science don't mix. And over here we have history, and over here we have ethics and religion. And you can't do that, you know, if we don't have a holistic view of the world and of life, and we don't have a realistic view of it. There's just the whole idea of, oh, religion and science don't mix, you know. Then you have a science, when you have a science that's divorced from the broader context of history and ethics and religion and philosophy, we have the potential for a lot of abuse and misuse of this tool, of this area.
Yeah.
And so
sorry.
So that's the whole idea. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's a discussion also in thinking about classical education and recognizing that, you know, as in classical idea, they're looking for a logos, a unifying principle, that kind of something that permeates all of knowledge and wisdom. And of course, we know that that's all summed up in the Lord Jesus. And so, so classical education, Charlotte Mason, are both seeking to get at this connection between all knowledge, because of course we know it all comes from one source. All true knowledge comes from one source. So yeah, love that.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, and then to artificially try to sever those relational connections is really to misunderstand and deny the whole order of things, because like you just said, the universe has order, and it's because of its creator.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
When we try to separate,
there's one other thing that Charlotte Mason had said that I thought was really interesting. Yeah. Okay,
I think we have some delay.
There was one other thing that Charlotte Mason had said that I found. Okay.
You go ahead.
All right. Can you hear me? Okay. There was something else that Charlotte Mason had said that I thought was really interesting. Said that studied science to the exclusion of everything else. She said he didn't take any interest or pleasure in, you know, art or poetry or things divine. She said, and she contrasted that with the Renaissance men, who she said they were artists, they were architects, they were engineers, they were musicians, and they had a vast body of knowledge that they tried to you know, that they were able to draw from and enjoy on a regular basis. No, it's not yet. You can check it in the drive. I don't think it is. Mom, is my bedding done? Bedding washing day.
So who was that you were talking about in your first example? Because I missed that.
Okay, it was Charles Darwin.
Okay, I kind of thought so. I was gonna make sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. Well, I know C.S. Lewis talks about men without chests. If you ever get a chance to read
The Abolition of Man.
Yes, thank you. It's a fantastic book, has lots to say about education and actually treating people as humans made in the image of God with a soul, or spirit, as some would prefer to say. So anyway, such a good book, such a good thought. We don't want to compartmentalize or try to divorce our brain from our heart, or, you know, yeah. We're made in the image of God and need to be, given all that requires.
Yeah.
All right. So I had one last thought on talking about these connections that develop between what we're reading and what we're experiencing in life and how they play out with our kids. would this kind of connection be possible without seriously limiting screen time? We already talked a little bit that overly planned activity will get in the way of this sort of thing happening naturally. I suspect that overabundance of screens and just plain entertainment will probably also hamper
Yes.
this from happening.
Yes. With my kids, I noticed we had to scale back on some things. It got to the point where, you know, we have lots of good videos. We have lots of good creation science videos and all kinds of other stuff. And we would let the kids watch things, and we have some approved videos that they can watch as well, and cartoons. But we got to the point where, you know, we felt like we were letting them spend too much time with that. And so we had to scale way back and say, we'll do a science video now and then also a family movie night once a week.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, we have tried to stay away from the screen, because it really does hamper how much that they want to go out and do, and the time that they have to do that. So yeah.
Yep. And no one's going to have the same, you know, parameters set for their family. It's for everybody to decide on their own.
Right.
But we don't have a TV, and we've really enjoyed life that way. We have plenty of access to things via YouTube, videos, you know, a lot of things that are available through our library and all of that. If you do have a TV, it's just going to be a matter of how do you allow, you know, some freedom, but also keeping things to a healthy level, whatever that needs to look like. Knowing that attachment to a lot of things in pop culture, and to a lot of storylines in TV shows, characters there, while a lot of them can be even good, enjoyable, and harmless, too much of that fast-paced action stuff can hinder the ability to pay attention, to do the work of reading, to get to that fun and excitement with knowing characters and things. Some people will find that watching movies enhances their enjoyment of books, because they can just pick out characters they like and stories, and enjoy story in whatever form it comes at them. But for others, it may really make it difficult to get them reading, to keep them reading, things like that.
Yeah.
That being said, we always like to watch a movie adaptation of a book if it's available.
Oh, we do too.
And we how to pick it apart.
Yes.
So, okay, well, I think we should probably wrap this up. Do we have any thoughts on what we're doing next?
Let's see. I thought you had an idea for next month, but I may be wrong.
It's possible.
I thought maybe you had talked about it before. I don't know. I have to go back through my old emails, and some of them I can't find for some reason.
Yay, technology.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we'll say bye for now.
Okay.
At least
we don't want to be outside because it's raining and there have been tornado warnings.
Yeah. Okay,
I'm very serious. I'm very serious.
No, you aren't. You're very repetitive. Repetitive.
I'm serious. That 2 plus 2 equals 200.
Brianna says you're very repetitive.
I mean,
Saying the same thing over and over
2
again.
plus 2 equals 200.
Yeah.